All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here today. This is I think, the seventh webinar of our professional development series through the Society for Conservation Biology North America. And this one's going to focus on resources for undergraduate students to just ways you can best kind of prepare for careers in conservation. So I'm going to turn it over to our speakers in just a couple of minutes. But before I do that, I wanted to just quickly um, talk about this Society for Conservation Biology, just in case anybody's unfamiliar with it. So I hope you can all see my shared screen. I'm going to assume yes. Um, okay, so we're not advancing. There we go. Okay. So SCBNA, or the Society for Conservation Biology North America, we are the North American region of the broader Society for Conservation Biology global global network. So our region is a professional society that's focused on the conservation of biodiversity, healthy ecosystems, and human connections. And our mission is to provide a venue to connect diverse students and professionals to advance and apply conservation knowledge, and to welcome, support, and empower all voices engaged in conservation to contribute to equitable solutions and catalyze wonder for the natural world. So, in other words, just to sort of summarize that, we are a very broad organization that really tries to bring people together across the field of conservation. So this is biology, but it's also can be economics and psychology and sociology, and really anything that you can think of that is sort of adjacent to or involved with the field of conservation, really in any way. So we're very broad. Our members have access to professional development opportunities like this webinar, and many other webinars, both geared at students and professionals and educators. We hold conferences every 2 years, regional conferences. Our next one is in 2026 in Milwaukee. And then the Global Society also releases, I think it's 3 publications that members can subscribe to. So if you're interested in learning more about our organization, or you think you may want to join, there's a QR code here. You can go ahead and scan it. We'll probably also put a link to the website in the chat. Um, so this webinar has been organized by the Student Affairs Committee. Um, so the Student Affairs Committee's, which I'm the chair, Student Affairs Committee's goal is to provide resources for students, both undergrads and graduate students, as well as early career professionals. So we organize activities and resources kind of to achieve those goals. And we host networking and professional development activities, both remotely, like this one, and also in person at our conferences every 2 years. So our activities tend to focus on technical skill building. These can be through workshops or online webinars, career development opportunities, and then also social and networking events. Those tend to be more geared in our in-person conferences. So we have a pretty sizable student affairs committee, but if you're interested in being involved with programming for students, or you have any ideas for things that would be helpful to the student community in conservation, please feel free to send me an email. My email's down there at the bottom. Or if you want to join the committee, just let me know that too. So this is, I think this is the second to last of our winter webinar series on professional development, or on professional networking and career development. And then come spring, we're going to kind of transition into more sort of technical skill building and data analysis. So the next webinar we have in this professional development series is going to be April 23rd, and that's a job panel. We'll have speakers from different parts of the private sector, kind of environmental science. And then after that, May 7th will be the first webinar in our data analysis and skill building series, and that one will be sort of an introduction to data visualization and organizing data using R. And that's actually part 2 of an introductory webinar that we had a year or 2 ago, which can be found on our YouTube channel, which all of our other webinars are available there as well, if you need to see them. Okay, so at this point, I will turn this over to our speakers. First, we have Sean Hoban, who is a tree conservation biologist at the Morton Arboretum, and Lindsay Taylor, who's a conservation programs coordinator at the Natural Resource Foundation of Wisconsin. And both of them will, I'm sure, give a little bit more detailed introduction to themselves as well. When the At the end of the webinar, you're also going to receive a post-event survey, but if you would like to do it earlier, you can scan the QR code here. All right, and that is it for me. Maybe Sean, do you want to start off?
Sure, I can do that. Yes. Hi, everyone. It is very nice to be here. My name is Sean Hoban. I am the senior scientist in tree conservation biology at the Morton Arboretum, which is a botanic garden and plant science research institute in the suburbs of Chicago, the western suburbs. I've been working here for 9 years, and I'll tell you a little bit about myself, a little bit about my career path, a little bit about what botanic gardens do, and then I'll talk about some careers in conservation, some career opportunities, and then some brief career advice. Um, I want to acknowledge that the Morton Arboretum sits on the ancestral homelands of the Council of the Three Fires and other indigenous tribes that resided on or migrated through this land. And my team is committed to learning from, acknowledging, and respecting those traditional ways of knowing. You can find more about our lab at hobanlab.com. I love trees. I have been working in tree genetics and tree conservation for, um, if you, I started my PhD in 2005, so a while. I love trees, their size, their longevity, their ability to dominate and create environments, as well as persist as an organism that cannot move in some challenging environments. And speaking of challenges, trees are facing a lot of challenges in the world. Um, Illegal timber harvest, invasive pests and disease, deforestation, especially for agriculture, increasing forest fires because of climate change and forest management practices. Um, but I am happy to be a conservation biologist and to take on those challenges. It's really a privilege, I feel, to be able to work in the field of conservation biology to try to, as the tagline of my lab, which is knowledge to action, we try to develop the knowledge and tools to guide conservation action, especially focused on species adaptations, species being able to respond to changes through their genetic diversity, and making sure that populations are well placed for a changing future. So it's a great opportunity to be able to work on those challenges and have an impact. I've been here at the Arboretum since 2016. I also have a position at University of Chicago where I do mentor PhD students. Um, that's a real privilege as well that the University of Chicago allows people whose my main appointment is at the Arboretum, that I can also serve there. So my team, some of whom are shown here, this isn't the most up-to-date photo, but some of us are still here. Um, Hallmarks of our group, we have a big focus on training and mentoring, teamwork, positivity, computational skills, open science, open data, and communication, including science communication. Um, which makes us a good fit for the Morton Arboretum, which is, like I said, a botanic garden outside Chicago. If you don't know a lot about botanic gardens, I encourage you to look them up. Because they're a great place to get to know nature and also a nice career opportunity. So the Morton Arboretum is one of the bigger botanic gardens in the US with over 1 million visitors per year, many thousands of students and adult learners. We also provide policy support, tree care, training, and tree planting activities in the communities around Chicago. We have a tree breeding program and a science communication and global conservation action program as well. So Botanic Gardens, I think that this is my first career message, which is I think you should consider Botanic Gardens as a future career opportunity and also a future partner for your conservation research. Botanic Gardens have a unique combination of skills, resources, and networks that is unique technology, unique decades of data, facilities, expertise in horticulture, pathology, expertise in science communication as well, herbaria. There's all kinds of great things about botanic gardens. So if you haven't partnered with a botanic garden, it can be a great way to enhance your current research or to find a future career. There's about 3,000 botanic gardens globally, and we have a huge audience, hundreds of millions of people. Um, Botanic gardens are helping solve issues like food security and biodiversity loss. And we're closely related to organizations you might be more familiar with, like zoos, aquaria, museums, libraries, and science academies. We have some overlap with these different cousins in the research community. So how did I get here? Briefly tell you my story. I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, um, on the border of the Midwest and the Southeast. And I spent a lot of my time in either the Midwest or the Southeast. Although I grew up in the suburbs of Louisville, I did try to get outdoors a lot as a kid. I was a scout and I did a lot of camping and hiking, and that's where I came to love trees. So these are some pictures from if I remember, Daniel Boone National Forest. Blanking on a couple of these names, but Mammoth Cave National Park, a few of these amazing land between the lakes. Some amazing areas in Kentucky to get to know the natural environment. As a kid, I also grew up in the 1980s and 90s when there was a real crisis of deforestation in the Amazon, and the deforestation was just really on the news all the time. I felt as a kid, anyways, that's what I noticed, and I think that really influenced my career path as well. So professionally, I got my PhD at Notre Dame, really focused on the foundations of ecology and evolution. I went to a small undergrad school, so I had to actually make up a lot for some missing concepts that I hadn't learned about in ecology and genetics, um, quantitative ecology. I'll be honest, grad school was actually very hard for me, coming from a small liberal arts college. So after that, I went to Europe and I did two postdocs, one in France and one in Italy. And I worked for the first time on kind of translating to some degree science to a non-science or science adjacent audience, I would say. Managers and policymakers, especially trying to explain conservation genetics concepts and activities to managers and policymakers and to build tools that they can use. I then went to the University of Tennessee and the National Institute for Mathematical and Biological Synthesis, an NSF-funded synthesis center, um, where I did a lot of work on coding and kind of learned to leverage simulations and big data. And now I'm at the Arboretum, which I describe as a bridge organization. It's not an original term, it's been used in the literature, but it's an organization that has science as a part of its mission, but also has close ties and a lot of trust with policymakers, industry, and the public, and is actually usually more approachable than universities, academics might be. So we really have a lot of ties, partnerships um, with the state kind of agencies, with the local and city agencies as well. And we do put a lot of our science into action. So that's my career path. Just want to highlight a couple of opportunities we have at the Arboretum, and also similar organizations have these opportunities. So it's not like you have to come to only the Arboretum to find these. You can find these at a lot of organizations, even universities, but also museums, again, zoos, aquaria, libraries have some of these opportunities. So research experience for undergraduates. Many of you might be familiar with this is a summer program funded by NSF, usually a approximately 10-week experience, intensive research. At the Arboretum, we also have something called a research technician fellowship. It's a flexible fellowship for those who might not have been able to do the summer experience to work during the school year, part-time especially. So we can provide that opportunity to people who, may need employment during the school year. We have research aides and research assistants. This is kind of a first step in a scientific career. A lot of people do this between their undergrad and their master's, or their master's and their PhD. And some people just find this is a great home and they stay in this career for their whole career. It can be laboratory technicians, data scientists, field assistants. Again, sometimes that's as a bridge to graduate school and sometimes as a career in itself. We have a lot of people who work in horticulture, really nice field to go into as well, adjacent to conservation. Actually, very important, increasingly important to conservation. We have community outreach and tree planting as well, which is, I think, an increasingly important part of conservation, building that love of nature. Um, so there's something called the RAMP program. This was recently funded by NSF over the past few years, research and mentoring program for recent graduates. We also have Student Conservation Association interns and Seeds of Success interns. These are two nationwide programs that a lot of early conservationists get involved in. Um, Overall, so those are some specific opportunities, but as you look towards your scientific career, maybe you want to be a scientist, maybe you want to be an academic professor or researcher, but there's a lot of cool careers that involve science and conservation that I think you might consider. So curators at museums, science communication people, librarians, arborists, people who coordinate volunteers, science writing, and government relations and policy are great careers as well. My recommendations for preparing for your career is to emphasize these things in your coursework. Data science, coding, statistical analysis, and data visualization. No matter where you go, that's going to be important. Space and spatial ecology is, I think, really important right now at all scales, from the city to the globe. Communication skills and being able to work well on a team. When I'm hiring people, I really make sure they not only have the technical skills, but are really going to be able to work well in a team, communicate, delegate, allocate tasks, and then field work showing, of course, that you can design experiments, that you can get out, collect usable data in the field. Those are some good things to help you prepare. That's pretty much it for my presentation. Short, I know we want to focus on Q&A. I just want to acknowledge and thank the organizations that have generously funded my lab over the years. A small call out to the Institute for Museum and Library Services, which funds not only museum and libraries, but also zoos and botanic gardens. Um, don't want to get political here, but this is, if you don't know much about the Institute for Museum and Library Services, you might want to look them up. They are currently under threat, but they do provide a lot of valuable support for scientific research, archives, etc. Anyways, thanks to all of these funders of my work, and thank you for being here today.
That's great, Sean. Thank you very much. Lindsay, do you want to take over?
Yep, I will go next. All right, looks like everybody can see my screen. Looks good. Great. All right. Hi everyone. I might be looking to the left. That's where my presentation is located at the moment. So that's where I'm looking. So great to have you all here. I love talking with students, and I titled my presentation "When to Wander and When to Grow Roots" because I've done a lot of wandering and I've also put a lot of roots down in the last 5 years, especially based out of Madison, Wisconsin right now. So I will talk similar to what Sean just shared. I'll share my career path so far, some challenges that I've had in that career path, day in the life of my current work and what I work on at the Natural Resources Foundation. I'll talk about what we do as an organization as well, and then some advice and resources. And I know we're going to have time for Q&A for both Sean and I at the end. So my career path so far has been a winding road to get me to Wisconsin. So I grew up in northern Minnesota. I went to school also at a small liberal arts college in Minnesota. My undergraduate major was biology, and I got an internship with the Student Conservation Association at Great Smoky Mountains National Park, so down in on the border of Tennessee and North Carolina. And I love that this is how my career in conservation started because I was actually really interested in an interpretation internship with SCA. That's what I applied for. And I got a phone call, and they said, we had a lot of interest in the interpretation position, but we think that you would be a great fit for this web design slash photography position. And, would you be interested in that? We would love to interview you for that. And I was just excited to go work at a national park. And so I said, sure, I'm happy to do that and interview for that. And so in that job, I ended up working on the back end of the national park website, um, doing a lot of kind of administrative tasks, but I also got to help write social media posts and spend days out in the park, taking photos. And so, it wasn't the education position I was interested in trying, but I tried to look at it as a learning opportunity and say this was a chance to go learn something. And that the looking back, that position and the skills that I learned really set me up for my next position, which was an internship in Denali National Park. So this was through the Scientists in Parks program. It was called Geoscientists in the Parks at the time, but they've generalized it a bit more. There's also a sister program, Mosaics in Science, which focuses on diversity, equity, inclusion, diverse identities, working in conservation. So both of those are good programs to look into. And as a science communication intern, I still remember when I found the job posting, they listed five, main skills that they wanted the intern to have, and it was exactly what I had learned in the Smokies. And so I remember having the feeling like this was meant to be, like this was such a weird way to get here. And it went really, really well. So I was there for 2 summers. Um, as a science communication intern, and I did a lot of different work when I was there. The first summer I was working under the science communicator, so at the national park. I made a story map. If anyone here is familiar with GIS, you use a little bit of GIS in it, but it was pretty light for me. It was more of like a writing and design project. And then the following summer, one of my big projects was I was working under the wolf biologist in Denali National Park as a science communication intern, helping her communicate the scientific research with the public. And so something that she needed was a template for a report that they would list annually. And so I helped draft a template of this first report, and it still is a template that they're using to this day. Every once in a while, I'll go check and say, "Oh, they're still using the the template I made however many years ago that was already." Um, while I was in the park, something that if you are in internship positions, usually supervisors are really interested in mentoring students and exposing you to new opportunities. So I was very lucky to get to go out into the park with different biologists or different scientists. This was something I actually did on my own time. There was a citizen science monitoring program there. They called it the Grizzly Bear Scat Project, or the Grizzly Bear Scat and DNA Project. And so, all of the hiking and backpacking in Denali National Park is off trail. And so there was a project that started that they wanted to learn more about population density through grizzly bear scat DNA. And so they would give out these kits to people, visitors, or local employees who are going out to recreate in the park. And if you came across grizzly bear scat, which is always a little bit nerve-wracking when you come across grizzly bear scat, but you would collect some of it and bring it back, and then they were able to learn from that and process that. And citizen science is such a cool way to be involved in science, even if you don't have an internship or a career in it yet. But also, it is really, really helpful to the scientists because in this case, there wasn't enough people power on the team to be out hiking all throughout the park, and so it fits a lot of interests. So after I worked in Denali National Park, starting those couple summers, I ended up embarking on a seasonal lifestyle, which is I had no idea that this existed when I was in college, and I like to share it because it's just something that's really different. And so I worked positions lasting 4 to 6 months in the summer and winter, and would bounce back and forth. They often include housing, and then you've got that travel time between jobs. So, usually I would have 2 months off between jobs where we would drive to or from Alaska and come back. And there are jobs in conservation and environmental education, but also if you're just looking to explore the world a little bit and learn more on your own after college, there's tourism and hospitality and all kinds of other jobs too. One of our winters, my now husband and I spent going to New Zealand. So there's also a working holiday visa program. There's a few participating countries, primarily New Zealand, Australia, Canada, and Ireland. And this program allows you to get a working holiday visa, which basically just means you're allowed to stay in a country for up to 12 months and get a job. My main work, we ended up doing mostly traveling. I ended up having a hard time finding a job in conservation directly. So I was working at a couple different hostels just to make it cheaper for us to travel around. But there are jobs in conservation in these places. So that's another way that you can just kind of expand your horizons and, basically get paid to travel somewhere and spend some time learning about another country. So then I ended up going back to Alaska for 2 more summer seasons, and this time I got a job as a field educator at a local nonprofit. So this was, um, you know, a cool path because I had originally always wanted that interpretation position in the Smokies, and I was able to finally try that in Denali. So I led groups on interpretive hikes, like in this photo. I taught classes between an hour to 3 hours long, and my whole job was just talking with people and teaching about nature. And I loved it. I had no idea that I loved public speaking. I thought that I hated public speaking, but turns out when it's something that I'm really interested in, I super loved it. So this was a great learning experience for me and just something, again, totally different than I had been doing before. So as far as challenges of this lifestyle, because it was an amazing lifestyle, but there were also challenges. Looking for new work every 6 months is super rewarding, but it can get really tiring. And most seasonal positions don't offer benefits. I was lucky that since it was right after college, I was still on my parents' health insurance. That was a huge privilege to be able to be on their insurance while I was traveling. I wasn't really sure how to get into, permanent real world jobs. I was very familiar with the seasonal, job boards and everything and how to look for those positions even in conservation, but getting into more of a permanent job seemed really challenging. And I also wanted a deeper understanding of conservation work, and all my education and discussions I led helped me understand that. And so I did go back to grad school, and I think it's great that Sean and I are here together because we took different paths in higher education. So I completed my Master of Science in Environmental Conservation at UW-Madison, so based in Wisconsin. And this program is a 15-month professional program. So this was not a research-based program. It's very focused on, it was an accelerated program, very focused on conservation leadership skills and giving you a breadth of knowledge. So taking a policy class and taking some ecology classes. Social science classes, GIS, kind of hitting on some of these key skills. But though I loved science and I loved learning about science and I still love reading about scientific research. My brain was not wired to be an effective scientist myself, at least designing my own research. And so this was the path that I chose. My final summer, students in the program work with an organization, and so my capstone project was coordinating a regional conservation plan between a set of 6 different partners in southwestern Wisconsin. So I facilitated all of those workshops and then was the primary author on that conservation plan. And once I graduated from that program, I started my full-time role at NRF, the Natural Resources Foundation. So, a day in the life of conservation coordinator and a little bit more about our organization. We are a nonprofit. We were founded in 1986 to protect Wisconsin's lands, waters, and wildlife. And we do that through providing funding, so grants. Um, connecting partnerships and leading partnerships, and then also through improving access to nature. So in our grant making, we have three different main areas we focus on. Our lands and waters, we're focused on what we have in Wisconsin state natural areas, which are our best examples of natural communities and biodiversity in the state. We have wildlife. Our organization was instrumental in helping bring back the trumpeter swan to Wisconsin. And then we also have some endangered species in Wisconsin, like the whooping crane and the piping plover chick that's pictured here. And then for environmental education, we also give grants to schools, nature centers, and nonprofits. And overall, we give around $1 million a year to these organizations and have thousands of partners across the state. So we have a lot of outreach involved in our organization too. We have a field trip program. Wayfarers is our program for young adults. The Great Wisconsin Birdathon is Wisconsin's largest fundraiser for bird conservation. In 2 months, we raise more than $100,000 each spring for bird conservation in Wisconsin and connecting people with volunteer opportunities as well. So my title, what the heck is a conservation coordinator? It's kind of a jack of all trades. And I honestly, I think there are a lot of roles in conservation that can be really hard to sum up because you get to do a lot of really cool stuff. And that's something that I value in a job. So in my role at NRF, I'm involved with grant program coordination. So those outgoing grants that schools are applying for or other nonprofits and partners. I do a lot of convening of project partners and facilitating projects. So managing partner projects that we have going on around the state, supporting our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. We have a diversity, equity, inclusion, justice community of practice, which is made up of around 200 practitioners and environmental educators across the state. I bring them together bi-monthly, and we either have speakers or, kind of like this, where we have speakers join us or workshop topics. I also lead the coordination of the diversity and conservation internship, which I think I have a slide on, so I'll talk more about that in a moment. And then just other general support. So writing newsletters and communications, tabling at conferences, site visits with organizations. So I get to do a lot of different stuff. So the Diversity and Conservation Internship is a program we started in 2021. I co-led in 2023, and then last year in 2024, and this year I'm leading that program. And this program really focuses on skill building, networking, and professional development. So it's a 10-week paid position with our partners, and they spend Monday through Thursday with our program partners as an intern for that organization. And then on Fridays, I bring them together as a cohort and either lead field trips or virtual programming for them. And that's all professional development focused. This was our cohort from 2 years ago. And it is for undergraduate students based in Wisconsin. So some of the skills needed for conservation, mine focus a lot more around the skills that I need in my job because I'm, not a scientist out in the field. So problem solving and creative thinking, organization is huge. Try experimenting either even in school, experiment with different ways to manage to-do lists. I feel like every year I try a new way to manage my to-do list because it can be hard to manage so many different projects at once. Facilitation, how you bring groups of people together and lead meetings, and then also teamwork, just like Sean mentioned. Conservation is a team sport, so you need to know how to work in a team and how to do that well. And then finally, my advice, I just have three kind of main points. One is to keep learning about yourself. It is so helpful when you are job searching to be able to speak to your values, your strengths. This is stuff that we hear a lot, but it's hard sometimes to come up with those answers for yourself. There is a value sort so this card deck that's on the lower right, I use. It's more about personal life values, but can still be really helpful. I found it at REI and have so many people in my life do it, and it's really fun to talk about. But there's also a values exercise. I'll drop the link in the chat when I'm finished. But this virtual version is more focused on professional values, and can be really helpful to speak to your professional values, especially in interviews or cover letters. And that's not something that a lot of people do. And being able to say, here's what I value in a job, and this aligns with this job, I think comes across as really powerful to reviewers as well. And then the Strengths Finder assessment, I'm not sure if anyone here has done that, but I was able to do it when I was in college, and I felt like it was so helpful in helping me learn about and identify strengths that I wouldn't have even known were strengths. I think my number two strength was love of learning, and I didn't know that that was a strength. So I just thought that that was something I enjoyed. So highly recommend that. I think you can pick up a book with a code at a bookstore for $25, and I will tell you it is well worth it. It changed the way I think about myself for sure. Connect with others. So go to conferences, informational interviews. I still do informational interviews because I just think it's fun to set up meetings with folks and learn about their work and their career path. And I've been in the field for, 5 to 10 roughly years. So don't be afraid to reach out to people, especially, if you met them once at a conference, or I have sometimes just emailed people that I've never met and said, I'm really interested in learning more about your work. I'm a student at XYZ. Could we set up a quick Zoom chat or something? And then just to dream big and take chances. I never ever would have expected that I would spend 4 summers in Alaska in my life, and it I absolutely changed the course of my life. And so, be open to opportunities. You won't always find the perfect job right away. My current position, I was offered while I was a part-time grants assistant in grad school. And, at first I kind of thought, well, I don't know if this is exactly what I expected to have, but my position has grown into something so beautiful and that fits me so well. And so I'm really grateful for that and grateful to be here. And I know we're going to move into Q&A next. I'll put my emails in the chat too, though. I'm always super happy to connect with students. And if you have never done an informational interview, I'm willing to be your guinea pig. So feel free to reach out and connect. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Thank you so much, Lindsay and Sean, too. Those are both really great. We can at this point turn it over to a Q&A session. So if anybody has anything they'd like to ask our speakers, you can either type it in the chat or raise your hand or just shout it out, to be honest. Yeah, Jonathan.
Hi, I have a question for Lindsay. Well, thank you so much, first of all, for both of you guys for sharing. But I was wondering, for like specific to Student Conservation
Hmm.
Association,
Hmm.
a lot of these roles, especially like outdoors and like more remote parks, I was wondering, how might you like personalize a resume or cover letter to kind of match one of these roles?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it is definitely, I'm sure most people here have heard this, that you should be updating your resume and well, for sure, cover letter, also your resume for each position you apply to include different sets of skills. But as far as what's a good way to personalize it, I actually, while I'll answer your question, and then I'll look for an article that I found a few years ago about how to write a good cover letter, and I thought it had um, some good tips on just kind of how to bring your voice more into the cover letter. So don't feel like cover letters need to be, and also, Sean, if you feel like this is different in academia, please tell me. So I will let you speak to that too, maybe. But in my experience, I've just learned over the years that cover letters don't need to be, really stuffy, formal letters. Professional, yes, but try and you can bring some creativity into how you are telling your story. So this article that I'll look up the link and share. It was from Harvard Business Review. Had some tips about like saying this is everything I look for in a job, or here are my values, my strengths. I'll also share that something I've done that my first supervisor in Denali taught me, that I've used ever since, is a bullet point method in my cover letters, which I think is pretty impactful. And I used to think, oh my gosh, you can't put a bullet point in a cover letter. That's insane. But she kind of showed me her format, and starting with an introduction and then saying, here are the skills that I will bring to this, and having three main bullet points. And basically, each of those paragraphs is like a main skill that you want to highlight for how it applies to the job and how you've done it before. And I think that that's really helpful because it it's different than what a lot of people do, and it's also really easy for reviewers to scan your cover letter and kind of see what you're offering and if you're a good fit for the job. Um, does that answer your question, Jonathan?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Anna, you're muted.
Uh, So the next question we have is one for Sean, and I'm actually going to expand on it a little bit. So in the class that this is from Kennedy, in the class that Kennedy's taken, they focus more on animals. So what steps are taken to protect organisms that can't move around? And then I'm going to just tag on a little extra bit onto that question, which is if your education has mostly been focused on animals, how feasible is it to switch to like a plant kind of focus or back and forth?
Okay. Um, I will first just say I echo everything Lindsay said. The being personal in your cover letter is good. So everything Lindsay said there. For this question about plants and animals, plant conservation is exciting. It is underfunded and doesn't have as much attention, which probably means there's a lot of opportunities there because there's 400,000 plant species on Earth, which is way more than the number of vertebrate species. So there's a lot of work to be done, but a lot of the conservation techniques are similar. Translocations, protected areas, supplementing populations, understanding the diseases that are impacting them. It's all the same techniques in conservation biology. Um, in terms of getting into that career, if you've mostly worked on animals, it's not a problem, especially if your early career. Again, it's those fundamentals of, what are the problems in conservation, small populations, habitat change. They affect plants and animals both. Um, and then the skills are the same, data collection, data organization, being able to communicate, being able to make a hypothesis. Those, for me, are the most important things.
All right, I can move on to the next question from Jamie. You've mentioned NSF-funded jobs going forward with the current administration. Is this still a suggested approach for next year?
I can go first. To be honest, we are in an uncertain time. Um, uh, a totally nonpartisan message. If you're worried about your career in conservation, now is a good time to start to be active in communicating to your representatives that you are worried about your career, and that will impact your state and the economy, um, and what you can bring to that economy. So I want to encourage people to bring this message to your representatives, your fears about your careers in science. The US has always been a world leader in science, and that is in danger now. So please bring that message to the people who can make decisions. Um, I would say NSF is as 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 solid of a place to go looking as any. I think the NSF RU program will continue, um, and I hope so. I don't have any crystal ball beyond that, other than hoping that NSF support will continue.
Lindsay, did you want to add anything onto that? Or I can.
Since I don't work as much with those organizations, I don't have anything to add. Thanks for checking though.
Yeah. But I think the next question is for you. Uh, yeah. Yeah. Out of the outreach programs that you've
Mm.
talked about, Lindsay, have you found others to be some to be more successful than others in aiding with conservation?
Yeah, I was just looking at that and was pondering it. I'd be curious to see if Sean has anything to add too. Um, well, so I guess speaking from, my organization, the Natural Resources Foundation, I think we have a few different outreach programs. The field trip program runs 275 public facing field trips around Wisconsin every year. They're all volunteer led. Um, So those are a really cool way just for people to be learning about nature, but it's hard to measure the impact of those because, we just hope that it's making people appreciate nature more, but it's hard to tie direct actions to that. So I would say, our Great Wisconsin Birdathon that every year opens April 15th, that runs to June 15th. We have participants make teams and then they fundraise for their teams. And it's basically a competition of like, some people view it as a competition of like who can raise the most money from their team. And so that's the fundraiser that's raising a hundred and the last couple of years it's been $125,000 in just 2 months routinely every year, just from people coming to the website and donating. And all of those dollars get turned around to go back to high priority bird conservation projects in Wisconsin. And I see, I get to see the people, the organizations that apply, and we're a small foundation, so those are some of our larger grants, usually $10,000 to $15,000, but that have a big impact on the birds in Wisconsin. So it's cool to see that it is a very outreach focused event, but it also makes a big impact financially too.
In terms of outreach, the Morton Arboretum also runs a lot of events on site in terms of adult education, field trips, tours. We have a huge volunteer program. We have over 1,000 active volunteers. Um, in terms of things that might be job opportunities, we run an initiative called the Chicago Region Trees Initiative, which does a lot of that training and tree planting um, and community partnerships. Um, the forest preserve districts of the Chicago area um, do a ton of outreach and events with kids, with families, with teaching about history and nature. So most of the counties around Chicago have really amazing forest preserve or conservation districts. And those are like county level organizations that are also a good place to look for jobs.
All right, so there's one or two more questions in the chat, but real quick, I'm going to backtrack and say something that I forgot to say earlier, which is that since we were talking about the NSF and federal funding situation, the Student Affairs Committee has been working on putting together, crowdsourcing a list of funding opportunities and resources that are not dependent on the federal system. So I'm just going to drop a link to our webpage in the chat. There's a link on that where if you know of opportunities, you can add them. And there's a link to the spreadsheet of results, which we just started doing this, so there's not much on there yet, but you can check that out and keep an eye on it in the future, maybe. Um, so let's see the next question. And this has been covered, but maybe we'll revisit it. Are there any organizations or anything that you recommend for hands-on volunteer work?
Anywhere. Um, anything you can do showing that you can get outside, that you can communicate, that you can work with teams. Again, those soft skills are really important. And just for whatever volunteer work you do, make sure you're translating in your cover letter what soft skills you practiced or worked on. Um, so pretty much anything that will build those soft skills and get you out in nature.
Yeah, I would echo that. You could try state if you have depending on where everyone here is from, state and agency, like we have the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources that has a lot of opportunities for volunteering and doing field work with DNR folks, nonprofits, any of the types of organizations that Sean mentioned, like botanical gardens or arboretums, zoos, aquariums, and there are a lot of different types of organizations. I usually would just scan around different organizations' websites that are in my area. Most of them will have a volunteer page, and you can learn more, and that's a perfectly good skill to put on your resume.
All right, so next, for those who are looking to go to grad school this fall with a specific focus in Nathaniel's case, tree pathology, what is the best method of outreach to specific thesis advisors?
I could take this one. Um, if you're wanting to go into an academic career, you should look for about 10 professors to contact who have similar, places you would want to work. You send them a 1 to 2 paragraph email. Be pretty formal. Use doctor or professor. Um, and just say, I'm interested in your lab for these specific reasons and explain specifically what interests you. Summarize your skills in a few sentences. Um, Ask if they have an opening. Not all professors have an opening for a student in a given year. Um, Attach your CV. Make sure first you've also read on the university website what's the procedure, what's the timeline, the due dates, and things like that. But yeah, that initial contact should be 1 to 2 paragraphs of what I just said. Attach your CV. If they don't respond within a week or two, follow up. You can send a couple follow-ups. People miss emails. It's okay to keep um, uh, sending follow-ups. I think that's about it.
I don't have anything to add to that since it's not my world.
Well, I was going to ask you to, Lindsay, because you mentioned informational interviews.
Mhm.
Would you kind of take a similar approach if you're reaching out to a professional for something like that, as opposed to like an academic thesis advisor?
Oh, for like to learn about jobs that are posted or things like
Yeah,
that, or
or for
just
like an informational interview just to set up a chat. Um,
yeah, yep. I would say make sure staying really professional. Make sure you have a couple sentences um, talking about or just mentioning, basically your elevator speech, like who are you? What are you doing right now? What are you interested in? What are you passionate about? And then I can also drop a link in the chat. I typically use the University of California, Berkeley has some really good pages on informational interviews with like lists of questions and things. So if it's hard to come up with questions, but I usually just ask questions like, what's a day in the life of your job like? How did you get where you are? What skills are important? Is there anyone else I could talk to that you could connect me with? And um, really important point about informational interviews is you are never doing it to ask for a job. A job could come out of informational interviews, which is one reason that you want to do it, but you're not going into it to ask for a position, or if they have open positions, you are coming in to learn. And um, sometimes a way that people do find jobs is, if you do informational interviews and get connected to enough people, at some point you're going to land on someone who says, actually, we have a great position opening up that is going to would be a great fit for you. Why don't you apply? But that's an important point that, you genuinely want to approach them from a perspective of being curious and wanting to move forward your learning.
so the one other question in the chat is what I think the only one I'm missing is what organizations would you recommend for ecological field work? But I kind of think that we covered that discussing about hands-on volunteer work. So Samantha, if you had anything you wanted to ask for a question, if there's anything you feel like is missing, just feel free to let me know. Um, and we can revisit that again. But otherwise, is there anything else that anybody wants to ask?
Because, and I can throw in a final question
Go for it.
because I know this comes up pretty frequently from a lot of our newer members. But Sean and Lindsay, you both pursued undergraduate degrees that had, were part of the sciences, biology, environmental science. But for folks that are interested in pursuing a different type of degree, say, communications or social sciences, what are some ways for them to also get involved in
Mm.
conservation? It's not hands-on work in the field, right?
Yeah, I can start. So I would say there are tons of opportunities for social sciences in conservation, and there are a lot of jobs where you don't need, data or field experience. So if that is not your jam, there's a lot of room in conservation for you still. Even like Sean was mentioning, like policy, like that's like a different kind of technical skill. But communications, project coordination, education, interpretation, like all of these really important roles, and even more than I can even think of off the top of my head right now. So a lot of internship programs have positions in that type of work. The program I was in, Scientists in the Parks, which um, I think will be either has already posted or will be posting in May their winter term jobs. So they do run positions in the winter. Applications are either due May 1st or announced in May. And then they post their jobs for summer early. So I think December 1st is when they post, just so everyone knows. They have a lot of communications, outreach type positions. There's a lot of other internships at a lot of organizations. I've worked at a nonprofit for the last 5 years, and I really love it. Obviously, there are pros and cons to working for government versus state, federal, state, local, nonprofits, private companies. There's a whole different host of organizations to work for. So nonprofits are a good place to look for some of those social skills, at least when you're starting to. Go ahead, John.
All the same things. The Morton Arboretum is also a nonprofit, and we have great people work. I mean, we need everyone. We need people working in finance. We need people working in communication. We need people giving tours. We need people going out and doing the kind of tabling that Lindsay does. We have all of that, and many conservation agencies, whether government, or other NGOs as well, have all kinds of positions. So, especially on the communication side, but
Mhm.
everything, driving, building, all kinds of skills
Mhm.
are needed. So if you love nature but don't want to do the science and the research part, there's a lot of other cool things you can do. Art, videography is very important right now, social media as well. That's it.
Well, great. I don't think there are any more questions in the chat, but let me know if I missed anything. And we are just about at time. I will say I'm loving this stream of links of resources that are going in the chat. This is excellent. And I'm pretty sure that these are all going to be posted on our website, most likely, that Bernie will take care of. And this session was also recorded, so it'll be up on our YouTube page.
Cool.
So any of these things will be available to revisit. But thank you very much, everybody, for coming. Many, many thanks to our speakers. This is a really great session.
Yeah,
Hope
thank you
you
so much for having us. Nice to
Thanks,
meet you all.
everyone.
Thanks,
Really
students, for being
great.
here.